What is probably the most famous quiz TV show in UK history and possibly the world?
Oh, is it something like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
It is. Charles Ingram and his wife Diana were found guilty of cheating their way using a system of coughs to signal the correct answer. Meanwhile, backstage in the control room, the production team are running around like headless chickens. They are trying to figure out what the hell they've just witnessed.
Well, that sounds suspicious.
That sounds so suspicious. And at trial, Charles and Diana are found guilty. And in the process, their entire lives are completely destroyed. But people have now started to wonder whether or not they were guilty at all. The production company had a very serious financial incentive to not pay out a jackpot. And then there's the tape itself. They'd amplified the coughs that supported their theory. Sadly, the Ingrams, they end up losing their home. Both their reputations are shot. But Adam, this might have been the biggest misunderstanding ever to hit primetime television. Welcome to The Compendium, an assembly of fascinating things, a weekly variety podcast that gives you just enough information to stand your ground at any social gathering.
We explore stories from the darker corners of true crime, the hidden gems of history, and the jaw-dropping deeds of extraordinary people.
I'm Kyle Risi, your ringmaster for this week's episode.
And I'm Adam Cox, the showpographer for this week.
I don't even know what that is. Showpographer. Do we really need that? Who signed that off?
Well, to explain what my act is, I take a ring-shaped piece of felt and I manipulate it into looking like various types of hats. If you don't believe me, here's a guy doing it right now.
What? Okay, yeah. So it's an old black and white video. And yeah, he's crafting a bunch of different hats from the different ages.
Which is a crucial part of a circus.
How?
I don't know. See, look at the guy. He's got so many different hats. About 14 different styles you can make.
That's pretty good.
From a single piece of felt. So it originated in the Parisian streets in the 1600s as a busking type act. And so now I'm bringing it to the Compendium Circus.
So you're also brainstorming new acts to keep us fresh and unique. Bringing back the old school stuff.
I'm going to keep those customers coming with my shipography.
Guys, if you are new to the show and you want to support us, like we say every single week, the best way to support the show and enjoy exclusive perks is to join us over on Patreon. Signing up for free gets you access to next week's episode a whole 7 days early.
And for as little as $3 a month, you'll become a fellow freak of the show, unlocking our entire back catalogue. There's like 20 episodes in there. Go, hunt them out, and enjoy.
And as a special thank you, our Certified Freak tier members now receive an exclusive Compendium keychain. All you gotta do is just DM us with your address and we'll send one straight to your door so we can always be dangling right there near your stinky crotch.
And lastly, guys, please follow us on your favorite podcast app and leave us a review. Your support really helps others find us and keeps these amazing stories coming.
And this week's episode is an episode suggested by Ollie Rayner from Berkshire.
Okay.
And when I saw the suggestion, I initially discounted it because I thought it was some kind of plague thing from the 1600s. It didn't really grab my attention, but I looked into it just to see what it was all about. And boy, I do not regret it. Because Adam, today on the Compendium, we are diving into an assembly of coughs that answered more than questions.
Okay. Cough. Something about a cough, obviously, but I have no idea right now.
Okay, so this might help you out. Adam, what is probably the most famous quiz TV show in UK history and possibly the world?
Oh, is it something like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
It is Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
The Coughing Gate scandal.
Yes! How crazy is that story? We actually know the story because we watched the ITV drama in 2020 called Quiz. Do you remember that?
Vaguely, yes.
Vaguely. That's why when I started reading this, I was like, this rings a bell. It clicked for me when I found out that there was this ITV drama. But Adam, I just cannot overstate what a total phenomenon this show was when it aired back in 1998. When it did, it exploded almost immediately, spreading to more than 100 different countries around the world. It is by far the best-selling format of this type of show in television history.
Didn't it even make Slumdog Millionaire? Wasn't that like part of the basis of that
I think
movie?
that was part of the plot, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So something I found really interesting, and I think you might too, between its start, so between 1998 when it first aired and 2025, there have been 710 contestants to take the hot seat and play for £1 million here in the UK. How many people do you think have actually gone off and won the £1 million prize?
That's got to be like a few a year, at least. 20 odd winners, 30 winners.
Actually, Adam, it's just 7.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which honestly I thought would be so much more. Apparently in the US there's been around 15 winners, but even still, even though it's more than in the UK, I still thought it would be a lot more considering how long the show's been running. But the crazy thing is that at its peak, the show was one of the most watched quiz shows in history. In 1998, it attracted more than 19 million people each week just here in the UK.
Wow, that's like one of the best ratings, surely, back then.
Yeah, and in the US, at its peak, it was attracting 30 million viewers per episode, which is almost the population of entire countries.
Yeah.
Of course, over the years, there have been some iconic moments. In the USA, in 1999, John Carpenter became the first $1 million winner. He manages to breeze through all 15 questions without using a lifeline at all. That is until the final question, where he uses his phone a friend to call his dad, only to tell him that he didn't need any help and he just wanted to let him know that he was about to win $1 million.
Wow. Smug.
So smug. The thing is, though, how shit would it have been if he'd got the answer wrong?
That would have been hilarious.
Either way, it would have been an iconic moment, right?
Yeah.
But in 2001, in the UK, the show was rocked by the strangest scandals in British history. It was dubbed, Adam, a British heist. So technically, this episode, The Coughing Scandal, fits under our heist series.
Did it ever air on TV?
It did not. And we'll go into that. But basically, contestants Charles Ingram and his wife Diana, who was in the audience, as well as a Welsh University lecturer named Tecwen Whittock, were all found guilty of cheating their way to the $1 million prize using a system of coughs to signal the correct answer. So yeah, the episode never aired, but the tape that was used as evidence in the trial has since been released. And a lot of people, even here in the UK, especially before 2020, had never heard of the story. And that's because, Adam, the scandal happened between the 9th and the 10th of September 2001. And as we know, the very next day, the world was rocked by the 9/11 attacks in New York, which ended up completely overshadowing this entire story.
Do you know what? We've had that happen on a few of our episodes where there's this big revelation that's supposed to come out. We had it with the Monster of Florence.
Yeah.
And obviously 9/11 kind of dominates, which understandably so.
Sure, it was a big thing, right?
Yeah.
The accusation, of course, was that Charles would read out the questions really slowly. He would mull over the answers one by one. And then Tecwen would then cough the moment Charles read out the correct answer. And Charles doesn't really stick to the system. On one of the questions, he actually really hyperfixates on an answer where he says, I think it's this one. I think it's this one. He's supposed to go through all the answers. And because he's messing up the system, what ends up happening is Tecwen throws out a cough that he basically says the word no in it.
Right.
So he goes, no.
Well, that sounds suspicious.
That sounds so suspicious, doesn't it?
Is that what was the giveaway? And then they had to go back into the tapes?
I think so. So there comes a moment during the episode where producers backstage, they're seeing all this going on. They go, something's not quite right here. And then all of a sudden, everything starts reaffirming what they're starting to believe. And so it really gets solidified when they hear this no cough. And in the end, Charles, of course, goes off and wins the $1 million prize. But because producers were suspicious something was going on during the recording, after the show, they freeze the check and they immediately call the police. And at trial, Charles, Diana, and Tecwen are all found guilty. And in the process, their entire lives are completely destroyed. But more than 20 years later, people have now started to wonder whether or not they were guilty at all. Because when you start digging into the evidence, things really do start to get murky. For one, the production company behind Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, the very people who brought this case forward, had a very serious financial incentive to not pay out a jackpot.
Yeah, but surely they must have catered for this. They must have been able to work out when you're going into this show that one in X amount of people are probably going to win this. Therefore, we need to factor that in for our budget.
Do you remember when we talked about how many winners there'd been over the last 25 years? We thought there would be like 40 odd, right? The reality is there's only been 7 in the last 27 years. However, by the time this jackpot was due to be paid out, there'd already been 2 winners.
Oh, I see. So they're a bit like, hang on a minute, didn't expect this.
That is the assertion that people are making.
So Charles Ingram was the 3rd winner.
He was going to be the 3rd.
Ah.
Yeah. But the reality is that immediately a month after, another winner had taken place.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
A lot of winners in just a very short space of time.
Yeah. They must have made it harder since.
Yeah, because then I think there's a big long stint of years and years where they just wasn't winning. And it's probably for that reason. Like, we can't keep paying out. We need to make these questions harder. And then there's the tape itself, the centerpiece of the prosecution's entire case. It was the production company who supplied it. And they admitted to enhancing the audio to make the coughs easier to hear. But when you look closer, you start to realize that those enhancements were highly selective. They'd amplified the coughs that supported their theory that something dodgy was going on, while conveniently muting and ignoring the ones that didn't. But the question is, were the coughs just a coincidence in the studio full of 200 other audience members, or was there actually a conspiracy to cheat the system? And a lot of renewed interest in this case actually came after the miniseries in 2020 called Quiz. The show leaves people firmly on the fence. It ends up drawing criticism from Chris Tarrant himself, the original UK host, who says that in his mind, there is no question that they were guilty. Like, the fact that they're playing with that to him was just not very ethical. But we've got to come onto his side as well, because when he first heard about the notion that they were cheating, he was like, this is fucking ridiculous. His mind only changes when he sees the evidence, which is this tape that's very clearly doctored, right?
Yeah.
The guy who actually wrote the show, James Graham, he actually heard about the scandal by seeing the actual evidence tape, right? The tape that Cellar Door had provided. And he was convinced that they were guilty. But after doing the research, he then starts to change his mind. So he's gone through almost the opposite journey that Chris Tarrant has gone through.
Interesting.
But Adam, today on the Compendium, I'm going to tell you about the 2001 Who Wants to Be a Millionaire coughing scandal, what went down, how it went horribly wrong, and whether or not this was just a bizarre coincidence, or if the production company behind the show really did manipulate the evidence to make sure Charles, Diana, and Tecwen never saw that $1 million.
I remember there being a documentary about it, so before the TV show, and it seemed pretty convincing that they were guilty. I always remember that, because I think it was the first time that the footage was released and you can hear all the coughs, but obviously these are the coughs that were enhanced.
Yes.
So I'm intrigued to understand, actually, could they be innocent?
I, for some reason, have a bee in my bonnet that they are innocent, that this was just coincidence. But it'd be really fascinating to see whether or not you are swayed by, I mean, obviously I wrote this episode, so there's going to be a lot of bias in it. But hey, this is just what my feeling is, and I'm going to explain to you why I think that they might be innocent. But before we get started, the history of the show is actually really interesting. It was originally meant to be called Cash Mountain. Did you know that?
Was it a British show? That doesn't sound like a British quiz show.
No, it was a British show. It was made in Britain. They eventually did change it to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire after the song Frank Sinatra sings in the 1956 film High Society. It's a much better name, right?
Yeah.
It does what it says in the tin.
It was the first game show where you could win £1 million. That was the kind of big deal about it.
So to lay down some context, I'm going to briefly run through what the show entails before we get into the story. Basically, the premise of the show is that there are 10 contestants that start each episode with a preliminary round called Fastest Finger First. The host will read out a question where the contestants must then rearrange the answers into the correct order. It's either like A, B, C, or D. Whoever is the fastest takes the hot seat and has a chance to play for the $1 million prize. The idea is that you have to answer 15 multiple choice questions. Each correct answer takes you close to $1 million. There is, of course, no time limit. At any time, you can decide to walk away with whatever money you have banked so far. But if you get the answer wrong, you then do drop back to the last guaranteed milestone question. By the time you get to question 10 for 32,000, you basically get like a free swing, don't you, at the $64,000 question? Because even if you get it wrong, you still leave for the 32,000, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people treat it as such. If you get a question wrong on the $500,000 question, then you drop down to 32,000.
Yeah, that's it. That would always be like the risk. Like, would you want to risk like 200,000? No.
And so, of course, if you answer incorrectly before question 5, then you leave with nothing. Adam, it's brutal. Can you imagine getting to question 5 and answering it wrong, being so confident and then you lose everything. Because the first 5 questions are really easy, so you probably don't even think to use your lifeline.
But if someone did have to use all their lifelines before that point.
Yeah. Charles uses a few of his lifelines before question 5, I think.
Really?
From what I can remember, yeah. But in the early days, in order to get on the show, you had to call a premium rate phone number that basically charged by the minute. The show was so popular and people were so desperate to get on that some people spent thousands of pounds just trying. And even then, it wasn't even guaranteed that you would get into the hot seat. Because remember, you still had to pass the fastest finger first.
It's quite a gamble to spend that much money trying to just get on the show or audition, essentially, because you still probably get vetted anyway before you get into the...
Yeah. 100%. You have to spend all this effort trying to work out how to appease the producers and get on the show. But then once you get to the show, you've got to go through another round, which is just, it makes it really difficult. In the hot seat, as you know, you have access to 3 lifelines. The first is, of course, 50-50. It's good if you've already narrowed it down to a couple options, but sometimes it really backfires, especially if the answer that you thought it was ends up disappearing.
I feel like that's probably the best one that you could have. I feel like that one, at least you've got a better shot of getting it right.
Really?
Whereas with Ask the Audience or Phone a Friend, who knows if they've got it right?
Exactly. That's the thing, though. So the next lifeline is Ask the Audience. Everyone in the studio has to press what they think the answer is, either A, B, C, or D, into the keypad, and a percentage breakdown then appears on the screen. It's really good for general knowledge or pop culture questions, but if the question is really obscure, it can cause like a narrow split in the results. What would your threshold be? If you had 2 answers come up and one was, let's say, 60%, the other one was 40%, would you trust the 60% one?
I think so, if you've got nothing else to go off.
Yeah, I would potentially use another lifeline if I had it. And then, of course, there is Phone a Friend. Contestants will submit 3 names of people who will be standing by in case they need to use them. But also, when you think about the maths, it's just incredible. Every episode, there are 10 contestants. Each one of those contestants has submitted 3 names to potentially be called if they make it into the hot seat. So across the country, on every single episode, you've got 30 people just standing by waiting to potentially receive a phone call.
I'm sure I've watched it where people have tried to call a friend and they didn't get through.
No, I've never seen that.
I'm sure that has happened, yeah.
How embarrassing. What do you do?
Well, I guess you would have to call someone else.
But what if it's... But you select your Phone a Friend specifically based on, oh, this is a geography question. Steve knows this one.
Sure, yeah.
And then you try to call Steve and he doesn't answer. Then you got to call Susan, who's all about music.
Yeah.
Oof.
She's rubbish.
Who would be on your Phone a Friend list?
Well, it's a good point. I guess if I needed a history question, maybe you. If I needed a geography question, maybe my geography friend teacher, Ariane.
That's true.
And if
she would know.
And if I needed a math question, I don't know. My nephew, he's good at math. He's learning that.
That's true. Your nephew is like a bit of a math genius. And so, of course, when the show took off, it was quickly franchised around the world, but it came with very strict international rules. All the hosts, believe it or not, were mandated to wear Armani suits because that was what the original British show host, Chris Tarrant, wore on the very first episode. And so he continued to wear Armani suits. They were also not allowed to change music or the lighting. And also the chairs all had to vibrate slightly to build up tension while you're in the seat. Over the years, though, of course, the rules have relaxed. But in the early days, they were really militant about creative control. You just did not mess with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire as a franchise show.
Yeah, they've got the formula right, so it's kind of carbon copies throughout the world.
Sure. But also they have a real history of being litigious. Like people have come forward over the years to claim that they'd invented the show. But Celador, the production company, they have no qualms about taking people to court and very often getting you to sign an NDA. So we don't really know what the situation was in the aftermath of that. The point is, you do not mess with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
So are you saying that a lot of people have thought about this idea? I mean, it's probably not that original, asking a load of questions, win a load of money.
If you invent a show, there's going to be some degree of overlap. And that's probably what they're arguing over, like, oh, I invented this little bit, or the hot seat, or the ask the audience, or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
Not the whole format as a whole, I don't think. And so the fact that Who Wants to Be a Millionaire can be litigious creates this perfect storm for what happens to Charles and Diana Ingram. Now, Charles and Diana are from Wiltshire in England. Charles is privately educated. He's actually very intelligent, and he comes from a middle-class family. By the time the story starts, he's a well-respected guy. He's a soldier in the British Army at this point. He's been serving since 1987 until 2003. He meets Diana when she is training to become a teacher, and in 1989, the pair marry. Diana, she becomes a homemaker to raise, of course, their 3 daughters. She doesn't work, but Charles is steadily rising through the ranks, first to captain, and then by 1996, he becomes a major, which I don't really know the difference, captain and major. Sounds like captain would be higher than major. I just don't get it.
Yeah, I don't really know the ranking, but it sounds like a big deal.
But he's a major.
He's a major. So
Hence why he becomes called the coughing major.
Yeah, and that's why he's so respected.
Yeah, respectable. In 1999, when Who Wants to Be a Millionaire is at the absolute height of its popularity, Charles is deployed to Bosnia on peacekeeping duties. Meanwhile, back at home, Diana is completely hooked on the show. It's right up her street. And that's because she comes from a family who live for pub quizzing. For as long as she can remember, her dad and her brother would head out every week to play their pub quizzes. And so by the time they're adults, Diana and her brother, they are completely obsessed with getting onto the show. They were amongst those people who would literally spend thousands and thousands of pounds calling that premium rate number just to get on. It's estimated that Diana spent £2,000. This is 1998 money, by the way.
That is so much money. Like, just put it into some kind of stocks. I don't know.
I guess in her mind, she is seeing this as an investment. If she can get on, she can do well, she'll earn that money back.
Yeah, I mean, does her quiz team always do well then?
Yeah, I mean, they're intelligent people. Mm-hmm. But to her dismay, her brother Adrian actually makes it onto the show first. His first attempt is in January 2000, but he doesn't make it past the fastest finger first round. That doesn't deter him though. So what he does is he builds himself a homemade fastest finger first practice machine, and basically he drills himself every night.
Wow, that is dedication.
With a fingering machine. Try to put a dirty joke in there, but yeah, kind of went over your
Sorry,
head.
yeah. I was just thinking that the lengths this guy went to try and get on the show.
Yeah, I know, for sure. When he finally thinks that he's nailed it, he tries to get back on. But again, he can't get through the selection process this time. He kind of starts browsing online forums, which is when he stumbles across an online community of hardcore quizzes called the Consortium, where he gets tons of advice on how to basically sound more interesting to producers during those audition calls. And remember, they are making a show after all. So while you, of course, need to be intelligent, they are more looking for people who would be interesting to show on television.
Yeah, you've got to be entertaining, like talking through the answers, and you can't just be straight-faced.
Exactly. You need to have a kind of a bit of personality.
Bit of charisma, uniqueness,
exactly.
Nerve and talent.
You need to be cunty. So the Consortium is run by a guy called Paddy Spooner, and he drops out of university to make trivia basically his full-time career. He starts off as a games master, running pub quizzes and tournaments and things like that, but he also applies for literally every single game show going, including Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. By the time he's in his 30s, he has been on so many shows that he's actually a bit of a celebrity amongst these hardcore quiz heads online. He is actually the first ever person to appear on multiple international versions of the show, including Australia, the UK, and the Irish editions. Naturally, everyone on these online communities, they want to know how he managed to do it. And this is what leads him to create the Consortium, this online community that Adrian stumbles across while he's trying to work out how he can get onto the show. On the UK show, Paddy, he ends up walking away with $250,000, right? So he does really well in the UK version.
Sure.
The Australian version, he also walks away with $250,000. But in Ireland, he manages to just secure €1,000. Apparently, he stumbles on the name of Pierce Brosnan's baby, which was a pop culture thing at the time.
And what was Pierce Brosnan's baby's name?
Oh, I can't remember. I think he's got like 5 kids. I couldn't remember which one it was. But he gets really cocky. He uses a 50-50 lifeline. The answer that he thought it was disappears. He decides to just flip an actual pound coin, and he just goes with that answer, and it's the wrong answer. But playing the foreign versions can be really risky, especially with those first 5 supposedly easy questions. Like, they're often very specific to that country. For example, a question might be, what color is the packaging of Walker's Ready Salted Crisps? The options are red, yellow, blue, and pink. What are you going to go for?
Well, if it's the UK, it's red.
But if you're in the USA, it's yellow.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah. So depending on which version you're playing, you can easily be stumbled by a very easy question where people will probably laugh at you and go, everyone knows that. But the thing is, though, you're coming to another country to play Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and you're getting fucked over by one of the simplest questions.
Yeah, I didn't realize people would even be that interested or invested in playing all the other alternatives.
These people are hardcore. They become obsessed with getting onto the show. And so after appearing on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Paddy suddenly finds himself in high demand. Every hopeful contestant wants to know how he managed to get on 3 times, but then also do so well. So he recruits a bunch of hardcore quiz enthusiasts. He turns his knowledge basically into a business that he calls the Consortium. They study what the producers are really looking for, and it turns out that it's not just about being smart. Like we said, they are making good television, right? So part of the service is coaching you on how to sound engaging and confident on that kind of 10-minute phone call. But part of the service is they also offer to be your phone a friend, which is actually being diverted to their HQ. Basically a room full of other quizzes surrounded by encyclopedias and trivia books. When you call through, they'll kind of like put you on speakerphone and they'll go, "Oh yeah, sorry, I'm so nervous. Let me think. And while they're doing that, like someone's like paging through.
What is the capital of...
Oh, yeah, I don't know this one. And then while someone's like in the room getting the answer, they then write it down on a bit of paper. And then they go, "Oh, I don't know. It's D." And then they hang up.
I mean, that's pretty smart, actually. I can see why this would be useful if you joined this consortium. Do you have to pay a fee?
If you do get onto the show, they take a percentage of any winnings that you get.
I think that's fair if they helped you out on a question.
But the thing is, though, this is the service that Diana's brother Adrian eventually comes across. He's not happy with a cut that the consortium want to take, and so he just decides to just go to loan.
I see, okay.
But also, Paddy claims that 10% of all UK winnings have passed through the consortium's hands. So they have got a lot of people that are very interested in getting onto the show and doing well. It's made a really good business from this.
Yeah, like the ultimate fan club.
So Adrian, he goes off all on his own. He tries to piece together everything that he can find about how to get through the qualifying call. One thing he learns is that producers apparently don't want strong regional accents. So if you had, let's say, a thick Welsh accent, your chances were quite slim, which, if true, is a massive scandal in itself.
Is that purely because they think, people aren't going to understand these people?
Possibly, but you'd think that they would want more diversity.
Yeah, that's quite narrow-minded, but I don't know, maybe this was back in the 90s or early noughties where it was like that.
But the thing is, though, Tecwen Whittock, he is Welsh. He follows some of the advice that is given by Adrian, and we'll get onto that in a minute, and he manages to get on. And I don't know if he actively tried to suppress his Welsh accent, but that's when he finally gets onto the show.
I see.
But apparently, if you come across really well on the call, there is a theory that they'll also throw you really easy questions on the show just to keep you around longer. Some say it's nonsense, but some of it might be true. Either way, Adrian wants to maximize his chances, so he takes everything to heart. Would you do the same? Like, if someone says, like, we think this is a theory, would you lean into it just in the off chance that it does increase your chances?
Probably. Yeah, if someone's telling you this is going to help you get onto the show, then absolutely. And it doesn't surprise me. Like, at the end of the day, they're making entertainment. So they know that someone comes on, they're like, we're going to have to give away a bit more money this time.
Sure.
Therefore, we can be a bit more lenient or whatever on the questions. I think that's what they do.
And the idea is that even during the show itself, if you come across quite eccentric, they'll start kind of reshuffling the questions to give you easier questions.
Interesting.
Now, keep that in mind.
Okay.
Eventually, Adrian makes it back onto the show in September 2000. Once again, his fastest finger time isn't fast enough. So he tries again and gets back on in December. So whatever techniques he is using is definitely working.
Yeah, I didn't realize you could go back on so many times.
Yeah, you're not technically considered a contestant until you've been in the hot seat.
I see.
Once you've been in the hot seat, you can't apply again. This time in December, he nails the fastest finger round in 7.1 seconds, which is quite long, I think. He breezes through all the first 10 questions without using a single lifeline. But then on the $64,000 question, he is asked, in the US and Canada, Labor Day is celebrated on which month? And the options were A, May, B, July, C, September, or D, November.
May.
You think it's May?
I think it's May.
He thinks it's May, actually. I knew this answer. It's September.
Oh, is it? I didn't think so. That's the first one I ruled out straight away, thinking, it's not September. That's too late in the year.
Well, I get this from friends. And I remember there's an episode where Joey is struggling with these feelings for Rachel and he's going through all the different things that she has taught him. And one of the things was, you never wear white after Labor Day.
Oh, it's because that's a summer kind of color.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't understand the reason for that.
Maybe one of our American listeners can let us know. But basically, he doesn't know. He's leaning towards May, just like you said. He uses his 50-50, which leaves May in September. So still unsure. He calls his dad as his phone a friend. And his dad says, I think it's May. And Adrian says, how sure are you? And his dad replies, about 50-50.
Yeah, I gave you two answers.
Which, of course, gets a massive laugh from the audience. So Adrian locks in May. And, of course, it's wrong. The answer was C, September. And so he walks away with $32,000. But now, Diane really wants to get onto the show. Adrian, he coaches her through, telling her what she needs to say during the calls. And she practices with a fastest finger machine, like 20 minutes a day or whatever. And in March 2001, just like Adrian, she gets onto the show, but she bombs the fastest finger first.
The
That's
pressure.
the tricky bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
A month later, again, she gets on. Again, Adrian's techniques are working. So just like Adrian, she storms through the first 7 questions without using a lifeline. At the £8,000 question, she uses the Ask Her Audience lifeline, and they do her a favor and she gets it right. At the £16,000 question, she has to use her phone a friend, which she calls her mate Russell. And again, she gets the correct answer. But just like Adrian, she bombs out on the $64,000 question and ends up walking away with $32,000.
That's still not bad, though.
It's not bad for a family hobby, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All they've done is just master 2 little areas, and then boom, they're on the show, and they've walked away with what? 32,000.
So her and her brother have both been on the show. I didn't realize she'd been on the show either.
Yeah.
Okay, so they come away with 64 together, and so this is where they then turn to Charles and go, you go on the show, and this time you're going to get us $1 million.
That's right. So she decides that if she can't take the hot seat, she would relive the experience vicariously through her husband, Charles. And so she calls up on his behalf.
Okay.
I don't know how this works because, of course, you're speaking to a producer.
Did she put on a voice?
Probably she's like, hello, I am Charles. I'd like to be on the show, please. Yes, I am a man. You can ask my wife. Here she is. Don't know how it worked.
Okay.
But apparently she applies on his behalf.
Right.
Using Adrian's techniques, Charles gets through in January 2001. But again, he fails on the fastest finger first round.
Every time. They really need to practice.
Every time, yeah. After this, Charles and Diana, they try again. This time, they get through on a couple special in March of 2001.
Oh, so she's allowed to come back for a couple special?
Yeah, because it's different, right?
Okay.
And again, they fail fastest finger first round. So they have no issue getting on the show. It's just that final round, you know what I mean? Charles starts practicing every day with Adrian's fastest finger machine, 20 minutes a day apparently. And then finally, on the 9th of September, 2001, he gets on again. And this time, he nails the fastest finger round. The question was, put the following words in the correct order from the title of Agatha Christie's thriller novel. Nile on Death the.
Death on the Nile.
Smashed it.
Yeah, but I
The
don't know
correct order was CBDA, Death on the Nile.
Yeah.
He does it in 3.97 seconds.
I would have beaten him if I knew where the buttons were.
You have to coordinate what you're thinking and your finger placement for where the buttons are.
Yeah, because I guess they just say A, B, C, D. It's not like they're right there in front of you, I imagine.
Yeah.
So you've got to try and...
I think it's a lot harder than we think, especially if these intelligent people have bombed out so often, right? So we're going to go through each of the questions in turn. And I think this will give us a sense of the coughing that the prosecution is talking about in the trial.
Okay.
Right? There is no coughing for the first 5 questions, at least.
Because they're easy.
Yeah, he breezes through the first 5 questions. The first question for £100 was, which of these would you air laundry on? A, closed dog. B, closed horse. C, closed rabbit. D, closed pig.
Closed horse. B.
B, that's right, closed horse. Correct. Moves on to question 2 for £200. What is the name given to a person who is against increasing the powers of the European Union? Is it A, Eurosceptic? Is it B, Eurostar? Is it C, Eurotrash? Or is it D, Eurovision?
I don't know.
Really? I'm shocked by this. Adam, it's Eurosceptic.
I thought it was made up. I kind of forgot what the question was, to be honest.
Wow, I had no idea that you would not know that one. But the thing is, though, this is a question, I had it scripted here that this is an easy question for UK audience. But if you were like a foreign tourist doing all the rounds...
We're not in the EU anymore. We are so skeptical. Like, we don't have a word for it.
But the thing is, though, we were so skeptical. That's the reason why we left. So we should have been aware of that term.
Yeah, back in the 90s, I would have been.
Anyway, he gets it right. He goes through to question 3 for £300. And the question is, what is butterscotch? Is it shortbread, pavement, garden flowers, or brittle toffee?
Brittle toffee.
Correct. And he breezes through to the fourth question for £500. Which of these is a nickname for a famous Scottish army regiment? Is it Black Hat, Black Widow, Black Sea, or Black Watch?
Black Watch.
Yes, I think I would have gotten that as well, just from Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I think that's the only way I would have got that.
But he knows this because he is an army man.
Of course.
So straight away, he honed in on it.
Mm-hmm.
So Charles moves on to question 5 for £1,000. The question is, the Normans who invaded and conquered England in 1066 spoke which language? German, Norwegian, French, or Danish?
Norwegian?
Wow, it's actually French.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Normans. Normandy.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
He locks it in. It is correct. He finally achieves his first guaranteed safety net of £1,000. So if he answers incorrectly now, he leaves with a minimum of £1,000.
I wouldn't have even got £1,000.
I think you would have used a lifeline. But the point is, he hasn't used his lifelines.
Mm-hmm.
He has breezed through them. But also, there's no coughing, at least no coughing on the tape that was handed to the cops.
Okay.
Next up was question 6 for £2,000. And the question was, in Coronation Street, who is Audrey's daughter? Is it A, Janice, B, Gail,
It's Gail.
C, Linda, or D, Sally?
I told you it's Gail.
Well, he laughs and he admits that he's never actually seen the show. And so he is actually forced to ask the audience.
Ah.
Now, they come back with a score of 89% for B, Gail, which is what you said. Would you
I
go
would
with
have
that?
gone with that, yeah.
I think I would have. 89 is quite high, right?
Mhm.
11% of people didn't know that answer. To be fair, I didn't know either until after I heard the answer and I was like, oh, of course, it's Gail. So he locks in B, Gail, and it is correct. But he's now one lifeline down, which you could say at this stage, on the £2,000 question, producers might be thinking that we're not looking at a millionaire. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you'd expect that.
Him to be a lot further along before he starts using his lifelines, right?
Yeah.
Like that John Carpenter guy from the USA who doesn't use any of his lifelines. He just breezes through them all.
Yeah. It sounds like he could be getting like 32,000.
Yeah, exactly. So question 7 for £4,000. Charles is asked, the River Foyle is found in which part of the United Kingdom? Is it England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, or Wales?
I have no idea.
I don't know this one.
England?
I would have used a lifeline. Again, he's unsure. And now he decides to use his phone a friend lifeline. So 2 lifelines down now.
Okay, right.
He calls Gerald, who says he's 99% sure it's Northern Ireland. Charles is completely convinced by that. He locks it in and again is correct. Boom.
Okay.
At this point, he's at the £4,000 question and the buzzer goes off. Do you remember what that means?
That means that's the end of the show.
It's the end of the show. So basically, that means that he has to return tomorrow night. So Chris Tarrant, he wraps up the show and announces the names of the contestants that will all be appearing in the next episode. These are the people that will be in the fastest finger first pit, right?
Gotcha.
Amongst those names, Chris Tarrant reads out the name of a man called Tecwen Whittock, who is a university lecturer from Wales. Hearing Tecwen's name piques Diana's interest because she knows him from the quizzing community. In fact, Adrian, her brother, had actually mentored him personally.
I see.
So apparently Tecwen had noticed that Adrian had appeared on the show so many times, so he decided to reach out to him to ask him how it was done. Adrian, obviously being flattered by the attention, he agrees to be his mentor. And this is, remember, Tecwen is Welsh, right? So one of the bits of advice was like, you got to
Be less Welsh.
Yeah. And so after Diana hears Tecwen's name, she calls him that night. And according to phone records, there's a phone call that lasts 5 minutes, which will become one of the key pieces of circumstantial evidence in the eventual trial.
So are the prosecution saying that this was the phone call that she had asked Tecwen to help out her husband because he's already used 2 lifelines. He's not going to make it that far. We need some help.
Yes. Prosecutors will later argue that this is the moment that the 3 of them colluded to come up with the infamous coughing system where Charles would read out the questions and possible answers and Tecwen would then discreetly cough on the correct one. Diana insists, however, that he's my brother's friend. I called him up to congratulate him for getting onto the show. We're a tight-knit community and I knew him enough to give him a call.
For 5 minutes, it doesn't feel like you could do that sort of plot that quickly.
Yeah.
Unless you're like, hey, I'm on the show. Oh, your husband's on. He's not doing well. Do you want me to cough? Next time he's on the right answer. And she'd be like, yeah, that'd be great. Okay, see you
Exactly.
later.
It's not, to me, it's not plausible. And so the stage is set, Adam. And this is the question that we're going to try and answer from here on in. Were they innocent, or was this the very start of a coughing scandal?
I think it's a coughing scandal.
So Charles returns the following night. At this point, he's on question 8 for £8,000, and he's used up all but one of his lifelines, and it's not even the best one. He's left with a 50-50.
I think that is the best one.
I just disagree. No. But basically, producers, they're just not expecting him to last much longer, right? It's the very beginning of the show. They reckon he'll be out in 2 questions.
And so Charles isn't actually, he's not an avid quiz person, is he?
He's not an avid quiz person, but he is intelligent.
Okay.
So they get to the studio that day. The prosecution will later argue, isn't it strange that you knew Tecwen well enough to call him up the previous night to congratulate him, and yet at the studio, neither of you acknowledge each other in any way?
Okay.
They say that's the actions of someone who didn't want to draw attention to the fact that they knew each other. But the argument against that is simple, Adam. They were both just focused on getting their heads in the game. Diana was there supporting her husband in a very tense situation. He's only on question 8 for £8,000. He's got one lifeline. And Tecwen, he's anxious about not getting through to the hot seat. So I get it. I get why you probably wouldn't. But also, what were they expecting her to do? Like be in this studio audience going, Tecwen, it's me, Diana. Do you know what I mean?
Maybe just like a wave. Oh, hi. I mean,
Yeah,
that's it.
and they probably did acknowledge each other in some way. It just, this wasn't what was caught on camera.
Okay.
So at the start of the show, there's the usual icebreaker stuff. Charles tells Chris that he has a new strategy and also a sub-strategy. So he's got 2 strategies. This ends up becoming basically a running joke between them throughout the episode. Chris will be like, so what strategy are we working with here? Are we working with a strategy or are we working with a sub-strategy?
Well, the sub-strategy is Tecwen over there coughing.
Yeah, exactly. So Charles explains that the reason that he's changing up his strategy is because he didn't believe in himself last night, and so he wanted to believe himself a bit more, because he says that if he had, he would have done a lot better last night and he wouldn't have wasted 2 lifelines. And so he says this time his approach is to read each question carefully, to think each option through out loud, and then just trust his instincts.
But it does also sound like this is him explaining why he's going to be approaching it differently in this night or this episode. And so that's why I'm assuming in the first episode, he's not reading those questions out loud back to him, but he is this time listening out for a cough, or that's what they think.
To me, it's also a stupid thing to do, because if you were planning on cheating, you've just announced to everyone what your MO is, what your plan is. So I think that's dumb. And I think that if you were going to cheat, you wouldn't have done that. You would have just kept that to yourself.
Yeah, okay.
So they start with question 8 for £8,000. Chris asks, who was the second husband of Jacqueline Kennedy? Was it A, I can't pronounce any of these words, Adnan Khashoggi, B, Ronald Reagan, C, Aristotle Onassis, or D, Rupert Murdoch? Do you know it?
No.
Charles sticks to his plan. He says, I know it wasn't Ronald Reagan, it wasn't Murdoch, I think it was Aristotle Onassis.
That was what I thought if I was going to hazard a guess.
Yeah, I definitely knew it was Onassis. So he repeats the name, Aristotle Onassis, and on the tape, a cough is heard. And then Charles says, I think it's Aristotle Onassis. Now, there is a cough. It's not immediate. That's the important thing to mention here. Remember, he's taking his time. There's no clock ticking. A few seconds passes before you hear this cough. And remember, with 200 people in the audience, there's going to be sounds that are going to be picked up. So you have to wonder, did the production team just pick the cough that was closest in proximity to when he answered the correct answer?
Or can they tell where the cough came from at this point?
Apparently, they say that this was picked up from a microphone above the fastest finger first pit.
Okay.
But the reality is, if it was, let's say, just a shallow cough, like a if you're far away, that's not going to be picked up. But if you're far away and you have like a cough like it'll be picked up, right? So there's no way of knowing how far that person away from the fastest finger pit is. It could have been someone that was like 4 rows back, a loud cough, and therefore picks up on that microphone.
Yeah. And I guess they've got no footage of Tecwen coughing.
0 footage whatsoever.
Okay.
So I just think like at this moment in time, they're setting out to prove something suspicious was going on, because they get turned on to that later on. And so they look for any coughs in that vicinity and they amplify them, basically. And we don't even know if they've done it with integrity either. There's just no way of knowing.
I feel like if I was them, they probably picked up some coughs that sounded dodgy, but then they used other coughs to just reinforce.
Possibly, yeah. And this isn't even one of the incriminating coughs. I would say this is more of a supporting cough. It could have come from anywhere in that area. Do you know what I mean? I'm just saying. So Charles locks in Aristotle Onassis. He is right. He moves on to question 9 for £16,000. And the question is, Emmental is a cheese from which country? Do you know it?
No.
France, Italy, the Netherlands, or Switzerland?
I'm going to go Switzerland.
You would be correct, I think. So he does think out aloud during this question. He says, I've had this cheese a lot. I think it's Switzerland. I'm trying to picture it. Does it say made in Switzerland on it? Like he sounds a bit uncertain. This time, there are no coughs, right? Which, if the theory is true, might suggest that Tecwen himself doesn't know the answer. Because we didn't factor for that, right?
Yeah, that's true.
What happens in those situations? In the end, Charles locks in D, Switzerland, and it is correct.
Yeah.
So he moves on to question 10 for £32,000, which is the second safety net question. And the question is, who had a UK hit album with Born to Do It released in the year 2000?
God, I probably would have known this at the time.
The answers are A, Coldplay, B, Top Loader, C, A1, or D, Craig David.
I feel like it's got to be A1 or Craig David.
That's exactly what he believes. So the answer is Craig David. And it's important to know the answer ahead of what happens next.
Okay.
Charles jokes and he says, top loader. That's part of a rifle, isn't it? So it's probably not that. Remember, he's an army man. So I see where the logic is coming from. It's totally wrong because they are also a band. He then says, I'm thinking it's A1. And I've got an inkling it's A1. I've actually never heard of Craig David. Crazy, right?
Okay.
At this point, there are no coughs. Again, maybe suggesting that Tecwen doesn't know what the answer is. At that moment, the cameras catch Diana glancing down towards the fastest finger pit, right?
Oh, yeah, that's it.
Which prosecutors argue that she is looking to Tecwen, like saying, why are you not signaling?
Like,
right?
come on, Tecwen, cough.
Exactly, but still no coughs come. Charles then uses his last lifeline, which is the 50-50 lifeline, which leaves him with C and D, which is A1 and Craig David. He then says again, because remember, he's never heard of Craig David, right? I think it's A1. A few minutes later, Diana coughs a few times.
Oh.
So fucking fake. She's like, she grabs her throat a little bit. I don't know. The prosecution claimed that because Tecwen didn't know the answer, Diana had stepped in to try and signal instead. But when you actually watch the footage, it isn't that clear. Her coughs are really spaced out. Like the coughs look fake, but they're not associated with any of the answers that he is saying or when he's saying them.
Maybe it's just a cough to say you're wrong and it doesn't necessarily matter. It's just if you hear coughing, think again.
Rather than signaling the right answer, you're honing in on the wrong question.
Think again.
It's tricky. It's so difficult to know. The coughing looks really suspicious because of how she's coughing, but it's not aligning up with the system that they supposedly had.
I think if it's a single cough, it's that answer. If it's multiple coughs and he's on something, change it.
You can't change up the formula at this point.
This is what they discussed in those 5 minutes.
No, it's not. I promise you, it's not. It can't be. Anyway, the prosecution will claim that because Tecwen didn't know the answer, Diana had stepped in to signal instead. But the suspicious thing here is that after being sure that it was A1, he does suddenly change his mind and says, I think it's Craig David.
What reason does he say that, given that he said he's never heard of him?
Apparently, in court, he says the moment that he said that he was going to go with A1, he hears the audience gasp, which makes him second guess himself, and therefore he switched to Craig David.
Ah.
Now, that sort of thing, I can get how it happens. It does happen, right? When they've interviewed loads of people who've been on the audience, they're like, people sometimes in the audience will like lean to the person next to them and go, do you know the answer to this one?
Yeah.
Or they'll be like, oh, I know the answer. Or like, no, that's the wrong answer. And people will gasp and people will react. So I get how that would happen. That's plausible to me.
And so this is his rationale and explanation for why he changed his answer.
Correct. That's what he is saying. So he says to Chris, I think it's Craig David. He immediately tells Chris to lock it in. It is correct. And so the coughs aren't that suspicious here, but it is a complete 180 turn for no obvious reason that ends up raising eyebrows, especially potentially backstage with the production, right? This might be one of the first seeds that they go,
seems a bit odd.
Something's weird here. Why did he just completely 180 change? He is saying it's because of the gasp. But here's also the important thing. On the official tape, you don't actually hear any gasp. And that's not to say that it didn't happen. It's just that It's another example of how the tape was selectively enhanced to amplify certain sounds. If the production team had amplified that gasp, would it have planted a seed of reasonable doubt about his guilt? By them muting it, we don't see that. All we see is a guy who's just changed his mind randomly. But the prosecution also said that before Diana coughed, she had glanced up at the studio monitors to check when the live feed wasn't on her. They claimed that she believed that this meant she wasn't being recorded, therefore allowing her to cough, which is not true.
She's always been recorded.
She's always been recorded, yeah. Diana says, actually, I was looking up at the monitors because I was sitting behind Charles. It's the only way that I could see his face. She wanted to see his expression. She wanted to see what he was thinking, right? And I totally get that. Like, I do the same thing. Like, she loves his face. She wants to see his face. She wants to see what he's thinking about. So I get that. So I don't really buy that she was trying to time her coughs. Anyway, Charles now has secured £32,000. He has no lifelines left, which is like a big thing. But he is now moving on to question 11, which is the $64,000 question, which is basically like a free swing.
Yeah.
The question is, Gentlemen versus Players was the annual match between amateurs and professionals of which sport? Lawn tennis, rugby union, polo, or cricket?
It feels very well to do. Maybe lawn tennis or polo.
So Charles thinks for a second and says, it could be any of them, but I think it's cricket.
Oh.
Right after he says that, there is a cough. He then reads through the options again: lawn tennis, rugby union, polo, cricket. Another cough. He then locks it in, and it is correct. And so far, this is the clearest example of a cough seeming to line up with a correct answer. 11 questions in, right? So really, this is the first proper example. So he's now on question 12 for £125,000. The question is, the Ambassadors in the National Gallery is a painting by which artist? Van Eyck, Holbein, Michelangelo, or Rembrandt? I don't know this one.
Rembrandt.
Charles tells Chris that he's actually been to the National Gallery and he's seen the Ambassadors and he thinks it's Holbein.
Oh.
When he says that, there's a couple coughs that follow. They're subtle, but the prosecution argues that because he had honed in straight away on this answer, he seemed quite confident with it. It was just like... yeah,
reinforcing.
Yeah, you've got it right. You don't really need my help on this kind of thing. And so he locks in Holbein, and again, it's correct. So he's now on question 13 for £250,000. And the question was, what type of garment is an Anthony Eden? Is it an overcoat, a hat, a shoe, or a tie?
I have no idea.
I had no idea either. But Charles immediately leans towards hat. A couple coughs follow as well. Again, very subtle. Again, probably for the same reason as before, because, of course, he's already honed in onto that question and it's just kind of like, yeah, you got it right.
Okay, so he's actually doing pretty well at this point, whereas before he's a little bit rubbish.
Yes, that's right. So he locks it in, and again, it is correct. And so that brings him to question 14 for £500,000.
Wow.
The question is, Baron Haussmann is best known for his planning of which city? Is it Rome, Paris, Berlin, or Athens?
No idea.
I have no idea either.
Yeah.
And so Charles goes straight for Berlin. He says, I think it's Berlin. And he says it really confidently, right? But then apparently the audience gasps. I didn't hear this on the tape. So again, just like with the A1 question, he wavers a little bit and he repeats himself. A little bit less sure this time. But he says, I think it's Berlin. Haussmann sounds more like a German name, which is why I think it's Berlin. But what's different about this question is that if this is a system, he is supposed to go through all the other answers to the question, especially if he is in doubt, and he hasn't done that. He says, I think it's Haussmann because Haussmann sounds more German than Italian or Parisian or Athenian.
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
Then, after repeating, again, I think it's Berlin, there is a cough. This one, however, weirdly, sounds like someone saying the word no. So it's like, no.
And does it sound like that on the tape?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. The prosecution argued that because Charles had gone off script, Tecwen had to improvise because he's like, no, go through the fucking answers, bitch. He doesn't do that. So he's forced in the end to go, no. And that just basically pulls him back on track. Meanwhile, backstage in the control room, the production team are now watching all of this unfold and they're going, okay, we suspected something weird was happening in a couple questions before, but now something really fucked up is happening. Chris, however, is blissfully unaware. He doesn't typically wear an earpiece, so he has no idea that all of this is folding backstage. The defense will later argue that this is where basically everything goes wrong. Not for Charles, but for the production team. The second the first suspicion crept in, everything else just seems to confirm everything that they already were starting to believe. Basically, they fell victim to confirmation bias. And in court, audience members and the other contestants, they will later say, yeah, while I was in the studio, I felt like something strange was happening. But honestly, I don't buy that. I just think it's kind of like hindsight talking. Do you know what I mean? Where they go, yeah, I knew something was up. But I don't think they did, because Chris Tarrant didn't.
They probably just thought, oh, this is odd. But maybe in terms of changing his answers and stuff like that, maybe. Yeah. And how is he getting away? Or how is he doing so well now? But maybe not thinking that he's cheating, just thinking that it's a bit odd.
I would get if Chris Tarrant picked something up, because he's there all the time. He's so relaxed with it. And I can get why the production team picked something up. But at the same time, I also think that something unusual happened. And then what they started to do is they started to coincide everything else that happened after that with the fact that someone was cheating. But also, we don't know if Charles actually hears the no cough, but he pauses, he rethinks his options, and he says, I don't think it's Paris. Immediately, there's a cough. He then continues. He says, I don't think it's Athens, and I'm sure it's not Rome. He then backtracks. He says, I thought it was Berlin, but there is a chance that it's Paris. There's no cough, right, after Paris. He then hesitates. He says it again. I think it's Berlin. I think it's Paris. There's a cough. So he looks up at Chris Tarrant and he says, I think it's Paris. And then immediately another cough comes after that. And he's like, yep, I'm going to say Paris. Lock it in. And it's right. And he's just won £500,000.
That seems dodgy to say, or to be able to cough every time he says Paris. That does feel suspicious. And even if you go into this with some kind of plan, I don't know if you would do that.
I mean, this is by far probably the most incriminating question.
Yeah, because he initially said, oh, he's sure it was German. And now he's completely backtracked. And then we've had the incident with Craig David question. No coughing on that one.
Other than from Diane.
Yeah, but there's two questions now where it does seem a bit sus.
So at this point, the pattern of coughing and the sudden change of heart is too much for people to ignore, really. Even for me, like, it does seem very suspicious. But backstage, everyone is now tuned in and they can all feel that something is happening. Charles, however, is now on question 15 for £1 million. And to show you how odd this one is, it is worth remembering that as well as being an army man, Charles is also a qualified engineer who spent part of his career fixing computers and laptops. The question is, a number followed by 100 zeros is known by what name? Is it a Google, a Megatron, a Gigabit, or an Annum?
A number followed by 100 zeros? Yeah, even I don't know. A Megatron.
Megatron.
A Giga Megatron.
So straight away he says, I think it's Annum. But it could also be Gigabit. I don't think it's Megatron, and I've never heard of a Google.
Oh God, it's a Google, isn't it?
It's a Google, yeah. He says Google again. Straight away there is a cough. He immediately changes track. By process of elimination, he says, I think it's actually a Google. He then laughs, but then he says, but I don't know what a Google is. He then loops through the options again. He says, I don't think it's a Gigabit. I don't think it's an Annum. I don't think it's a Megatron. I really do think it's a Google. Cough.
But if you don't know what it is, why would you think that? Unless you can say, I know a Annum is this, and I know a so-and-so is this, and therefore it leaves me with this, which I don't really know about. But I feel like he made the mistake of ruling it out straight away. If he hadn't have done that and just gone through the answers, maybe it would have seemed less suspicious. But I feel like, how can you believe that this feels dodgy to me?
It does. Now, again, he pauses, he repeats the list, and then he says Google again. There's another cough. He then tells Chris Tarrant that he's ruled out the others. He admits that he has no clue what a Google is, but he says it's the only one left in his mind that it could be. And so he asks him to lock it in. With that, Charles wins $1 million.
Just like that. I think the thing is, though, this must be so unusual. I can understand why production would be looking at him strangely, because he used up a lot of his lifelines. He wasn't that strong. And to go through 10 of the hardest questions like this on a bit of a whim.
Yeah, I don't know. Now actually going through the questions with you, there's a part of me that goes, oh, I'm now not really that sure anymore.
Something's a bit suspect.
Maybe that changes what I'd like to say next. I don't know.
But what had you planned to say about this?
That he's innocent, and I'm convinced he's innocent.
Okay, so why do you think he's innocent?
Let's go through it.
Okay.
The studio explodes, applause and cheers, there's confetti raining down. Chris Tarrant beams as he normally does, and he says to him, like, you have been the most remarkable contestants we've ever had. Your strategies have been baffling, but they've worked. And then he gives him his check for £1 million.
Because he's been cheating, Chris.
Yeah. He hands Charles his check. It's an actual paper check. And I did write down here that after watching the actual tape itself, it's hard to say whether or not the coughs were deliberate. Like, the gaps between some of them make it really difficult to tell. Remember, with 200 people in the audience, there are bound to be coughs and shuffles and weird noises. But still, those last two questions, the Houseman and the Google one, they are suspicious though, aren't they?
He coughed a no, or someone
did.
He
did cough a no. It's very hard to deny, especially when paired with his habit of flipping kind of answers at the last second. Now, Charles later says that after hearing about Adrian's theory that producers preferred interesting contestants, he was trying to be more dramatic on purpose. For instance, acting uncertain would give producers better television.
I see, okay.
Remember, he's playing under the belief that if you are entertaining, you might get easier questions as the episode progresses.
But I don't feel like they're easier questions.
Yeah, maybe to him they are, but at the same time, here's where I think that kind of falls flat. You're on the very last question. What's the point in fucking around?
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like, I've now got my $1 million. I don't need to be entertaining, so you give me a next question that's easier.
Yes, I agree with that.
So it's a stretch, in my opinion. But still, with £1 million on the line, would you really gamble on being performative for the producers? I don't think I would. I wouldn't gamble. I would be as eccentric as possible.
That's probably why you're not allowed on.
Yeah. I haven't tried. Have you been applying on my behalf? Hello, I am Kyle. I want to be on the show, please.
But I don't know. If they had quit like 250,000, for example, I wonder if they would have got away with it, because that no
probably
just feels the one that's just too suspicious.
Yeah, it does sound very suspicious. So Charles and Diana, they head back to the hotel, probably to have sex on their check. Not quite as satisfying as actual cash, but like, you got to work with what you've got, right? Meanwhile, the production team are running around like headless chickens. They are trying to figure out what the hell they've just witnessed. And they believe that they have just seen a televised heist unfold on national television. The producers, they basically call a crisis meeting, and in the end, they all agree that something strange has definitely happened. And so they quietly place a stop on the check and they immediately call the police. The next day, of course, as we know, is September the 11th, 2001. Mm-hmm. Everything that follows is, of course, overshadowed by what happened in New York. But that morning, Charles gets a call from a Millionaire executive telling him that they've noticed some irregularities during filming and that they've put in a stop on the check.
And what does Charles say to this?
Charles immediately says, and this will be very much in question in court, I would most certainly deny that. Like, he may as well have said, what? There was no coughing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
He might have just said, oh, what do you mean? Or
yeah,
find out.
What irregularities?
Yeah. So that feels like if that was his first response, that does seem odd.
When he does eventually find out, of course, he does deny everything. But on that call, he doesn't say, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
That's my money. I won it fair and square. He doesn't say that. Meanwhile, Celador, the production company, they start combing through the footage. They isolate a total of 19 coughs in total that they claim line up exactly with Charles saying or settling on a correct answer, basically. Mm-hmm. It's not long before the media run with the story. Initially, they were just keen to know who this £1 million winner was. But what piques their interest is that when Celador refused to kind of share any details, this only spurs the press on, who then start believing that actually there's been a Millionaire winner. Why they're not telling us the details? Is there a bigger story here? And so eventually, Celador is forced to issue a statement hinting that they suspect foul play. Within days, buried beneath the front pages of the 9/11 coverage is the story about the coughing major and how he cheated during Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
How long did it take them to arrest them, or how long was the investigation?
Well, the thing is, though, the trial won't start for 2 years.
Okay, that's a long time afterwards.
But after they call the cops, they are quickly arrested and they're all charged with fraud. And this is where things start to get really messy as we head into the trial. First, the prize money itself, typically at the time, is split 50-50 between ITV and Celador. And remember, there have only been 7 winners in the UK across 25 years. 3 of those were between the year 2000 and the year 2001. That's a lot of £1 million payout in such a short space of time. Did they maybe need an excuse to not have to hand over another £1 million prize?
I understand that, and that's a good angle, but then would they tear down a single person just to save out on that cash? At the end of the day, they are a big corporation and they just need to go, we need to make the questions harder.
Possibly, but keep that in mind anyway. Second is the tape itself, the one that was used as evidence in court, which takes them over a year to be finally submitted, and it's labeled, Adam, version 6. So why so long to submit it, and why so many versions? Maybe they just wanted to make the coughing clearer for the jury. Fair enough. But those 19 questionable coughs, they weren't visible in the footage. You only hear them. They supposedly came from the area near where Tecwen was sitting, and obviously around where Diana was, because we did catch her coughs on camera. But no one could see anyone coughing. So I'm not sure how you can prove those coughs didn't travel from further away in the studio, given how sound can carry sometimes. What version 6 doesn't show is that when you amplify all the coughs across the studio, there were 192 coughs across the entire episode.
The people were coughing the whole time.
People were non-stop fucking coughing. So it's 19 out of 192 coughs. That's 10%. So what are the chances that those 19 coughs could have just been mere coincidences?
This is where I think there's a few coughs which have caused suspicion, and that's what they've looked into. And then they're potentially enhancing or using other coughs just to make their case stronger.
Yeah, supporting coughs, as I said.
Yeah, so that's what I think's probably happened, because they think maybe 1 or 2 is just not enough to get him on this. And so they're trying to basically build their case. So regardless of how many coughs, if there's just 1 or 2, then that's enough.
That's exactly. I think Celador, as you just said, possibly knew that the jury might conclude it was all just a coincidence. And so they deliberately enhanced only the coughs that presented a pattern that supported the main coughs, but also on the other questions to reinforce this idea that they were cheating. But the point is, they weren't transparent about all the coughs that were picked up or heard in the studio audience. The defense had to physically request that information. Otherwise, they were happy to just submit that tape with the 19 coughs, making you believe that all the other coughs that they had muted, the other 90%, just didn't happen.
Okay. So slightly misleading.
It's very misleading. And so the trial starts in March 2003. When Charles takes a stand, the prosecution goes straight for the jugular. They want to know about the coughs labeled 12 to 14 on that tape. To them, they, of course, are the most incriminating. Cough 12, as we know, is the big one. The one that supposedly sounds like someone saying no.
Do you think they meant to do no as a cough, but then were like, oh, I did it wrong, and then said no afterwards? Because it sounds like that is dodgy.
We've actually listed the entire episode in the show notes, so fish that out and let us know what you think. And remember, audience members are talking all the time. People have attested to the fact, like, they'll lean over to the person next to them. Do you know the answer to this? I know the answer.
Well, this is the thing.
It's
they can't, like, pin it on Tecwen, can they? They can't say for certain it came from him.
Yeah.
So could an audience member just gone, no, don't do that sort of thing?
And apparently it happens all the time.
Yeah.
And he may not have heard it, but remember, they've amplified that sound.
I also wonder how much you can actually hear in the studio when you're sitting in that seat.
Chris Tarrant said he heard nothing.
Yeah.
So if he heard nothing and he was sitting right next to Charles, does that mean that Charles also potentially didn't hear anything? But then maybe Charles is honed in on listening for the coughs.
Yeah. And do they add the music when you're playing as well? That background music?
I think so, yes.
Is that after in post? Because that's the thing. Like, if that's playing, I don't know if you'd actually be able to, like, pinpoint any coughs.
Interesting. Yes. So when they play the tape in court, and they play it a lot, the first time they play cough 12, the entire courtroom bursts out laughing because honestly, it does sound ridiculous, doesn't it? The prosecution asked Charles why he had changed his mind from Berlin to Paris during that question. Oh, Charles. His response was, I knew Paris was a planned city. The center of Paris was cleared out of slums during the 19th century, rebuilt into districts and boulevards. In my mind, it was connected to Napoleon III, who wanted to modernize France and help the economy flourish.
So it looks like you've been doing some light reading before this trial.
So rehearsed.
Yeah.
He clearly went home and read Wikipedia, basically. So the prosecution rolls her eyes and he says, but you were adamant it was Berlin. You said Haussmann sounds German. So which is it, Mr. Ingram? And so Charles looks really dumb in this moment. And so he just goes silent. If you generally knew Haussmann was tied to Napoleon III and redesigned Paris, you wouldn't have been sidetracked by the fact that it sounded German. Do you know what I mean? You'd be like, I think it might be connected to Napoleon. You would have said that rather than going, sounds German.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have done that. So Charles, in this moment, looks like he's been caught out in a lie. And this is also the moment that people start leaning towards him potentially being guilty. He later says, though, that the reason why he went quiet was because he didn't want to say anything stupid under pressure, which was very important to him because in the early media coverage, the press were painting him as this kind of bumbling, clueless army major fool, someone who couldn't have possibly answered their way to the jackpot honestly.
Yeah.
And so the last thing he wanted was to prove them correct. So he goes quiet because he doesn't want to sound stupid. But also, in the few months before the trial, Charles is like, I'm going to go do a Mensa test to prove all of you motherfuckers wrong that I am really smart. And his results put him at the top 2% of the UK population.
So he's just got this kind of weird social ability then, or skill. Maybe he's very smart, but can't always convey it that well.
Possibly, yeah. So he's not stupid by any measure. He's actually very smart. And so when the trial starts, he shows up every day with his little Mensa badge on his label, just to make sure that everyone knows that he's clever. But the problem is, Adam, it's so tiny that no one even notices.
What is that? Is that a stain?
Yeah. So during the trial, they also call Chris Tarrant to the stand. So to ease him in, of course, they start with like some light questions. He's like providing testimony, right? Mm-hmm. They ask him, has anyone ever got the first question wrong? And Chris Tarrant goes, it's happened in America. And then the whole courtroom erupts in laughter. Yeah, Chris genuinely looks really confused. Like to him, that was a factual answer, but he inadvertently end up landing a joke.
They thought, he's having a dig.
So the prosecution then asks if he suspected anything during filming. And honestly, Chris Tarrant says no. His mind was on Charles and the questions, and he never noticed any pattern of coughing whatsoever, which to me is telling. This is a man who has hosted hundreds and hundreds of episodes. He has finally tuned into that environment, right? Mm-hmm. And by then you'd be completely at ease in that environment. If something suspicious had been going on, kind of rhythmic coughs or weird audible things coming from the audience, I think he would have picked up on that.
I would have thought so. Like, of course, he's like concentrating on his job, but if he's done this for years, he's on autopilot a little bit. So he would spot something that seemed off.
I think so. Chris says that when producers first told him that they suspected cheating, his immediate response was, don't be stupid. But later, he says that after seeing the evidence, he changes his mind and he becomes completely convinced that Charles, Diana, and Tecwen were guilty. But remember, his mind is being made up that they were guilty based entirely on a doctored tape. Before that tape was shown to him, he was like, they're totally innocent, right? He only changed his mind after seeing a doctored tape. He also later said that in 2020 that he did not like the ITV drama quiz because it deliberately left things ambiguous. To him, there was no question they were definitely guilty and they definitely cheated. But again, that's based on the tape. He's allowed the tape to override his actual experience.
Yeah, he's made that his truth almost a little bit.
I think it was also on This Morning, the breakfast show here in the UK, that they asked him if in hindsight there was anything that proved Charles was guilty. And he said, yeah, there was. He says, when you tell a contestant what they stand to lose if they answer incorrectly. So for example, Charles, by getting this question wrong, you stand to lose £465,000 or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Contestants instinctively put their hands over their face and they're like, oh no, what do I do? Chris is basically saying that Charles did not do that.
Yeah.
But I watched the tape, and there are two instances where Chris lays down the stakes for him. The first time, he 100% does put his hands over his face. Mm-hmm. It's the second time that he doesn't, which shows how subjective all of this is. People do react to stress in very different ways. This tape proves that exact thing, right?
Mm-hmm. So, did he forget to do it there because he was acting?
Who knows? Yeah. Who knows? But people do it differently from moment to moment. In this case, he did, right? But by then, the coughing pattern had already convinced Chris that something weird was going wrong. Everything else, the body language, the silence, the inconsistent answers, all just reinforced what he came to believe after watching the tape. I don't know. Am I changing your mind that maybe they might be innocent?
I don't feel like there's enough to say that they are innocent, if I'm honest.
But is there enough to say that they're guilty?
It's a stretch. I feel like there's a couple of definite coughs that seem weird. Yeah. But unless we can prove it came from Tecwen, I don't know. I don't know what to think.
So this is when the defense start leaning hard into the maths. They argue that yes, there were coughs that coincided with the right answers, but there were also far more that didn't. 90% of all recorded coughs were completely innocent. And so could this just be a coincidence if the coughs that were coinciding with the correct answers is 10% of the coughs, 19 coughs?
Yeah, can we hear from the microphone that picked up those coughs that they submitted? I was just wondering, because then you can kind of go, actually, yeah, there's loads others that are happening at the same time from the same direction or whatever. Does it sound like a different person that's coughing? I know that's probably hard to tell, but it just paints a bigger picture of what's going on.
What you really need is footage of them coughing, right? And footage of Tecwen coughing.
I bet they must have cameras on the fastest finger first people now, just to make sure. I don't think they'd risk it.
So now they focus on Tecwen Whittock. The defense admit that yes, Tecwen was coughing throughout the recording because he suffered from a chronic, lifelong cough that has plagued him his entire life.
Oh.
Apparently, wherever he went, he had to carry a bottle of water. He carried inhalers, cough medicine as well. And to prove this, they bring in his friends and family, as well as their medical records, to testify to the fact that he did have a chronic cough that plagued him wherever he went. So he was naturally going to cough.
Or he was like, do you know what? I've got a chronic cough. We could use this to our advantage.
I don't know. So once they prove this, the defense then asks the obvious question. Why on earth would three people build a cheating system that relied entirely on a man who couldn't be trusted not to cough at the wrong time?
Yeah, but he could stifle a cough.
You're just not wanting to see that they're innocent.
Yeah, I don't know.
Which is fine.
Yeah, it could. I agree. I didn't know that he had a chronic cough.
They said, is it really likely that Mr. Whittock, a man who coughs involuntarily, would agree to take part in a scheme based entirely on coughing? Maybe in some weird warped way they thought they could also use this as a cover if they ever got busted.
That's what I'm thinking. But that's a lot to discuss in 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. They also highlighted how implausibly rushed the supposed conspiracy was. The prosecution were trying to argue that the entire thing was set up during a 5-minute phone call late at night, despite the fact that Tecwen was probably nervous and anxious about his own performance the next day, right? I'd be like, this is not the right time to be getting me to try and cheat for you. My chance is also at stake as well. Do you know what I mean? So is this really the kind of man who'd be in the headspace to agree to something like that? I'm not convinced.
But then he's not on the show yet. He hasn't got to doing the fastest fingers first. So he's got time before that happens. And equally, they're doing this as a team. So more likely to get more money if they do it together.
Yeah, we don't know if they're going to split the money or how they're going to do it. I don't know. But then they also take a closer look at Tecwen himself. Yes, he was part of the quizzing community, but membership doesn't guarantee brilliance. All it proves is that he had an enthusiasm for game shows. They argue that while Tecwen had been on several game shows prior to him appearing on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, he'd never done particularly well at any of them. By the way, by some incredible coincidence, it's Tecwen who is the contestant who gets into the hot seat immediately after Charles Ingram wins the million.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, so weird coincidence. And he only ends up winning £1,000.
Really?
Yep. So he's enthusiastic. He's not exactly an elite kind of quizzer.
Maybe he's like, I just won $1 million.
So if yeah, exactly. So if this was a conspiracy, it's not just dodgy, it's tragic. Imagine helping someone win £1 million
Yeah, then you do.
only to walk away with $1,000.
Yeah, your pride would be a little bit hurt. So if Tecwen is part of this quizzing community and he's been mentored before by, was it Diana's brother?
Adrian, yeah.
Adrian. They might have, even though they had only had a 5-minute phone call before that particular episode, they might have been in cahoots before this. They might have spoke about it before and they're like, let's use the cough idea. If at any point we're all on the show at the same time.
Yeah, on the forums and stuff. If we're ever on the show together, we'll do a coughing system.
I've got a chronic cough.
That's plausible. Maybe the fact that we now know that coughing and shuffling happens in the studio audience, they felt that maybe actually we could use this to our advantage. If we're ever on the show together, we could do a coughing system.
Maybe. I mean, it does seem far-fetched to come up with it that quickly.
Yeah.
But something about this doesn't seem right.
Yeah. The prosecution also said it was suspicious that they never acknowledged each other on set, despite knowing each other very, very well, enough to essentially make their phone call, right? Again, I think they were just both in their own heads, one preparing to play and the other one was supporting her husband. The defense also drew a comparison between the number of coughs picked up during the UK's first ever £1 million win in 2000 by a woman called Judith Keppel. They found a comparable number of coughs throughout the entire episode, some even landing very close to correct answers. So coughing, as we said, in the audience is completely typical. To me, it sounds like a classic confirmation bias, as we've said a bunch of times. Someone starts spotting a potential pattern, they hone in on it, and then from there, everything else that happens simply confirms what they already believe. This includes Charles's odd theatrical answering style, which he admits was an attempt to make himself seem more entertaining because he doesn't want to risk. If Adrian is correct, will they actually give him easier answers?
Yeah, I do wonder how true, because I guess that's a suspicion, right, that Adrian has. So we don't know for sure if that's what they do.
So when you lay it all out, there's more than enough reasonable doubt for me to say there is a solid chance that this is all just a coincidence, in my opinion. And I think that you're maybe not quite there.
I'm not quite there. I'm not saying like they're definitely guilty, but I'm also saying that they're definitely not innocent.
But out of 192 recorded coughs, only 19, so remember 10% were labelled as suspicious. But crucially, those labels of the suspicious coughs were assigned by the very company that had more to lose financially. If you're on the hook for £1 million, are you really going to be objective when you're editing their tape? I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm surprised like they didn't have a independent party to look at the tape and evaluate it. And it sounds like they didn't.
No, it doesn't sound like it. They were the ones who compiled the evidence themselves, and it took them 6 versions.
Like
right?
with any prosecution or defense, like you bring in like a psychologist or whatever, don't you, for independent research or whatever. And it feels like they should have done this to kind of vet the tape.
Yeah, for sure. There's a little brilliant anecdote from the courtroom. Apparently, because the court had watched the footage so many times and talked about coughing so much, coughing started to become contagious within the courtroom, like everyone was just coughing. So it's a bit like yawning. The judge eventually has to stop the trial because half the courtroom was essentially coughing. He literally thought they were taking the piss, which makes me wonder, is that what happened in the studio that night? Tecwen's coughing caused a chain reaction. So it's strange. But after 4 weeks, the jury retired to deliberate, and after 3 days, they returned, and the verdict was that Charles, Diana, and Tecwen were guilty, and they were convicted for procuring the execution of a valuable security by deception. That's what they're charged with.
Really? Can they not just say fraud?
So Charles and Diana, they both receive 18-month prison sentences. Tecwen gets 12 months. They're all suspended for 2 years, meaning that none of them actually have to serve any time. But Charles and Diana, they're fined £15,000 each plus £10,000 in legal costs. And Tecwen gets a £10,000 fine with £7,500 in legal costs. But while there's no jail time, they all three leave court publicly disgraced. Of course, Charles, Diane, and Tecwen, they still maintain their innocence even to this day. And if they were really innocent, that really fucking sucks, because it means that this is one of the most unfortunate coincidences ever caught on television. Even more so for poor Tecwen, the man who lives with this chronic lifelong cough, something he just can't control, only for it to land him a criminal conviction.
Yeah, that's true, actually. If they are indeed innocent, then what a load of misjustice.
Sadly, Adam, it doesn't end there. Soon after this, Charles is forced to resign from the army. The Ingrams, they end up losing their home. Both their reputations are shot. More so for Charles, since he struggles to find work again. They end up being in £400,000 in debt. And so, to try and stay afloat, Charles commits insurance fraud. He is found out, he's arrested, he's dragged through the courts once again. But he says he literally had no option. If he wanted to feed his family and keep their heads afloat, this was the only option. And in an interview years later, I think in the lead up to the release of Quiz in 2020, Charles says that between 2003 and 2007, their home and their pets were attacked more than 60 times.
That's gross. Why do people feel the need to attack these people at the end of the day? I don't know. I just feel that's a bit unfair.
He says that it was mostly down to youths, which places how old he is at this point.
Right.
He says that they beat his dog to the point of death.
That's awful.
The cat was shot with an air rifle. Luckily, it survived. Their windows are routinely smashed. Nails are left under their car tires. Their bins get overturned. He says it wasn't uncommon for them to wake up for their entire house to be egged. One time, they threw a bag of vomit, and he knew it was vomit because when he smelled it, he almost puked.
That's unfortunate. That's just horrible.
I feel awful for him. He
Yeah.
says that in public, people would routinely cough at them as well. One time at the cinema, it was so bad that they were all forced to leave just because they didn't want to disturb the other patrons in the cinema. Another time, Charles says he was out jogging and someone nearly ran him off the road in their car. And at first, he thought it was just an accident until the car slowed down and then coughed out the window.
Really?
So that's how he knew he was being targeted.
I mean, at the end of the day, these people that are trying to go for him, he hasn't harmed them by any means,
No,
right?
he hasn't. I would say it's a victimless crime, right?
Yeah.
It gets to the boiling point in 2007 when it all becomes too much for him that he ends up assaulting a 13-year-old boy who spat in his face and then coughed at him. And so he gets dragged through the courts again. And even though the boy later admits to exaggerating his story, Charles is still found guilty. So it just feels like there's just so much injustice hanging over this family. I really do feel so awful for them.
Yeah.
The craziest part is that most of this abuse is coming from kids, right? Kids who weren't even old enough to remember the scandal. Like this 13-year-old would have been 6 years old. So it's clearly just their parents parroting what had happened. It's coming from them.
Yeah.
So with Charles unable to find work and support his family, the only option they have is to capitalize on the infamy that has been forced on them. And so this marks a period of them doing the whole reality TV circuit thing. And the thing is, though, they know that going into this, that people are going to just hate them even more, massively slow down the public forgetting about them altogether, which is what they want. But at the same time, they also still need to support their family. So it's either, okay, we lean into it, we go into it, get hated even more, or we starve and then we finally get forgotten. What are you going to choose?
Yeah, you need to feed your family. So you're going to do whatever it takes.
Exactly. Do you remember what shows they end up doing?
Did he do I'm a Celebrity?
No, I don't think so.
Oh,
No.
okay.
He ends up doing Wife Swap.
Oh, okay.
Does it ring a bell?
Vaguely. So
Who does he swap with?
it's got to be another celebrity type person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who?
Jade Goody and Jeff Fraser.
Really?
Yeah. Jade Goody has been dead for 16 years now. Isn't that
Wow.
crazy? She died from cervical cancer. But she was a victim of another kind of cancellation, if you will, for, I think, saying some racist remarks on Big Brother towards Shilpa Shetty. But God, that's awful. But apparently, their stint on Wife Swap is, of course, chaos. Charles famously is impatient, so he has to obviously deal with Jade's manic energy. She tries to give him a makeover, which basically involves her dressing him like a chav. She says to Charles, if a tracksuit is good enough for David Beckham, then it's good enough for you.
Wow.
Jade Goody thinks that David Beckham is a chav.
Yeah, okay. He's not going to be best pleased about that.
They also later appear on The Weakest Link with Anne Robertson, where, of course, one of the answers to the questions is cough.
Oh, is it?
So, finally, in 2020, ITV released Quiz, which is a 3-part dramatization of the entire scandal. And believe it or not, this actually becomes a little bit of a lifeline for them. Excuse the pun, but for the first time, people start seeing this case with the nuance that it deserves. As we said at the top of the show was written by James Graham, who says that when he first started researching, he was convinced that they were guilty. But the more he digs into it, the more people he spoke to, the more he started changing his mind. And he says, yes, there were 19 coughs on the right answers, but over 180 others that just weren't. He also found it suspicious that Celador took months and 6 versions before handing over their tape to the police. Not to mention that they had already paid out £3 million in prize money in the previous 2 years. So they had every incentive in his mind to not pay out another. And there's a funny little side note. When Quiz aired in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, James and the producers were skeptical about whether or not anyone would actually want to watch a show about coughing. But it turns out that was a massive hit.
Yeah, I do remember watching it. It was good.
James says that he did speak to previous contestants and audience members, and this is where he found out that whispering and gasping and even chatting about questions and answers during filming wasn't something that was unusual. One guy says that he was sitting there and an audience member leaned over and asked him if he knew the answer, and he didn't, and he was like gleefully then told him what the answer was. It's like, it's D. So this kind of backs up what Charles said. Like, there were 2 occasions where he heard audience gasps that you can pick up on. You can pick up on the vibes of the audience.
And I guess he's not going to say, oh, I'm changing my answer because the audience just gave me a clue.
Exactly. Which it wouldn't be cheating if he did say that, right? Mm-hmm. It's up to the studio to stop that from happening. And the truth is, while no one can say with absolute certainty what really happened, I do believe that there is plenty of plausible explanations that account for the behavior enough for reasonable doubt, which in a court should have been enough for him to be exonerated. And yet he was found guilty.
Yeah.
Of course, as we know, like the most damning moment was the strange no cough. But we have no footage of Tecwen making that cough.
And if it was the same person?
I reckon that is the bit of evidence that sparks this whole thing.
I feel sympathy for him because ultimately he didn't deserve the hate and stuff like that came his way. And if he did try and do it, he almost got away with it. So well done, in a way. And if he didn't do it, then that's a real sad, actually.
He was on an interview not that long ago where people were saying, what do you think when you see the footage now? And it's brilliant. I actually won £1 million. And I think that's quite telling in a way. If he sees it as, wow, this is incredible. But then obviously at the back of his mind, he understands that there's this whole stigma behind it. But he gets a thrill when he watches it because to him, he genuinely won £1 million.
Yeah. That must be really sad to get. Like, actually, if it is all genuine, he never got to.
And he never got the money. So I'd love to know what you guys think. Watch the footage that we've linked in the show notes. And let us know. Do you think that he was guilty? But Adam, that is the story of the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire coughing scandal. That might have been the biggest misunderstanding ever to hit primetime television.
Or one of the best heists ever.
Or one of the best heists ever. I don't know. I'm sure he's innocent, but it would be cool if he actually did this.
Yeah. Good story. Good. I liked the fact that we did the questions and realized, I can't go on. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
I think you could. I think you'd do well. I'd be your phone a friend. And you'd have your 50-50 and you're ask the audience.
I'm not sure I'd have made it to £1,000. I got some of his questions, but I don't think I would have done anywhere near as well as him. Cool. So shall we do the outro?
Let's do the outro. And so that brings us to the end of another fascinating foray into the compendium and assembly of fascinating things.
And if today's episode has sparked your curiosity, then please do us a favor and follow us on your favorite podcast app. It truly makes a world of difference and helps more people like you discover the show.
And for our dedicated freaks out there, don't forget that next week's episode is already waiting for you on our Patreon. And of course, it is completely free to access.
And if you want even more, then join our Certified Freaks tier to unlock the entire archive, delve into exclusive content, and get a sneak peek at what's coming next. We'd love for you to be part of our growing community.
We drop new episodes every Tuesday, and until then, remember, every answer sounds certain when you've already locked it in. We'll see you next time.
See ya.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening. Happy holidays! Want to give your host a gift? Consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing the show this holiday season. It really helps the show grow. From all of us at Believe, have a Merry Christmas, everyone, and a Happy Holiday.